If Sukuna were to completely regain his power, it might be a little tough, but I will win. Satoru Gojo's bold declaration has just been proven correct. Jujutsu Kaisen Chapter 228 finally showcases why Gojo claimed his strength by forcing Sukuna into a corner.
I ain't gonna lie, I'm getting cooked.
After a flurry of domains and Jujutsu techniques, Gojo has just scored a huge victory. The scoreboard right now is 3-1.
Scoreboard! Scoreboard!
But at what cost? Whilst he's an unbelievable monster on the same level as the King of Curses, Gojo, after all, is still human. And just like Yuta foreshadowed in chapter 227, Gojo has pushed himself too far and he's slowly creeping towards his end. But how did things lead up here? Earlier, Sukuna was clearly on top of the tug of war between them, crashing Gojo's domain repeatedly. Even with multiple change conditions, Gojo had to rely on techniques like Falling Blossom Emotion to protect himself against Sukuna's attacks. In fact, he was mostly defending himself by adapting at an impossible pace. However, just when everyone thought he was out of moves, Gojo accomplished an unthinkable feat, something impossible, by reducing the density of Unlimited Void to less than a basketball, trapping himself and Sukuna inside it. Now, just like every other chapter regarding this fight, I see your comments, you guys are confused. But don't worry, that's why I'm here, right? So hit the notification bell to get more detailed explanations regarding this fight, as by doing so, Gojo compressed Sukuna's domain within his own barrier to exploit the weakness of open domains that Sukuna has. This rightly shocks everyone, as they once again start discussing the implications of this technique. Well, as expected, because of the small size of the domain, the barrier strength of Gojo's Unlimited Void increased manyfold. But Kusakabe claims something like this should be impossible. Bro shocked as if any part of this fight made sense to anybody except Gojo and Sukuna until now. Even the JJK manga editor was like, common sense doesn't apply to these freaks. This is why Queen Meme finally states what we've all been thinking. How many times have they claimed it's impossible up until this point? Even I've been saying it too many times. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what we call peak writing. Mwah. This leads to Maki stating that inside of a domain is vastly different. Just think of the example of how Gojo's domain against Jogo seemed like an infinite space of images with no end in sight. However, when he terminated it, we saw that on the outside, the domain was just a sizable sphere. So, whoever is trapped inside a domain can't really see the border of it, just like Maki herself couldn't when she was inside Dogon's domain in chapter 107. This is the reason why, according to her logic, the choice of escaping for someone inside the domain is eliminated. Moreover, even if the border is found, common domains are stronger on the inside than on the outside, which is why it's harder to break out of them. This means that only people outside the domain can perceive the borders of one and have a chance of entering them forcefully. A great example is Yuji doing this to Mahito and Megami with Dogon. Thus, it shouldn't matter how compact Gojo made his domain to be, because it simply doesn't impact the domain properties. But Kusakabe states that this goes against any anime physics.
I'm confused right now, G.
There are limits to domain construction that can't be ignored, as the most important thing for barrier techniques is detailed images. In simple terms, the domain's mass should at least be capable of containing the sorcerer as well as the opponent, otherwise it will collapse. It does make sense because it's like trying to put an elephant in a minuscule amount of space, it just won't endure the mass and burst open, right? However, Choso reminds us that Gojo has had the ultimate crash course in being forced inside a compact space much lesser than his mass, the prison realm. Yep, just like we explained in our previous videos, Gojo is using his learning experience from the damn box he was in for 19 days. He claimed to Sukuna he has been doing some special training for this fight, and here we are witnessing the fruits of its labor. Now with Gojo's unlimited potential, he has been learning and adapting to Sukuna's fighting methods every chapter, which is why he can do stuff other sorcerers can't even begin to imagine. So as Kusakabe mentions, barrier techniques and in particular domain barriers are created with a mix of inner conditions, external conditions, mass and speed. Evidently, it's such an intricate balance between all these aspects that it is an extremely difficult technique to use, even for strong sorcerers. Manipulating the conditions of the domain each time is an intricate balance that can't be replicated by normal people, as Gojo and Sukuna have been doing the impossible the entire time. Oh, see? I said it again. Impossible.
Oh, here we go again.
However, the only domains that are exceptions to these aspects are Higurumu's Court and Hakari's Idle Death Gamble. They are literally built different because rather than being imbued with the respective curse techniques, they are entirely constructed from them. This explains why Higuruma learned his curse technique by going backwards from his domain expansion instead of the other way round like is typical. But goddamn, Gojo and Sukuna are literally giving every other character a training arc just by witnessing their fight. The audience will become special grade sorcerers by the end of this fight, bruh.
Hey, that's what I've been waiting for.
Now, as the speculation keeps going, Gojo's domain once again starts shaking, which is, of course, bad news, as Yuta states that Sukuna also made the domain range small so he could enhance the output of Shrine, which is when another red flag appears. As Angel states, if this highly refined and concentrated barrier collapses, Gojo will be finished. No! Oh my god, guys, I can't take it! Remember guys, Gojo has been using Limitless and 6 Eyes, Reverse Curse Technique, Domain Expansion, Simple Domain, Falling Blossom Emotion, and also hand-to-hand combat since the fight began. With all the disadvantages piling up, his domain forcibly ending once again with spell defeat for Satoru freaking Gojo. And it happens! Gojo's domain comes to an end with slashes from Sukuna, as even he looks shocked. This worries everyone. Is this the end?
Wrong!
Whatever happened inside the condensed domain, Gojo managed to topple the entirety of the shrine inside Sukuna's domain. Earlier, he had noted that it is the center of Malevolent Shrine, and whilst he didn't go for it directly, it must hold some significance because even Sukuna is heavily injured. He has a massive hole in the center of his chest. Bro has joined the Donut Club. Yay!
Shut your stupid...
This is so hype. I mean, I feel like I'm part of the crowd watching this fight unfold. Just when Sukuna destroyed Gojo's domain from the outside, Gojo caused enough damage inside that Sukuna couldn't maintain his either. Therefore, it's another stalemate, but you can still witness that they are absolutely euphoric, as Sukuna is actually getting his dream come true, in which chapter 221 states that Gojo could be the only one that could cure him of his loneliness, stemming from being the strongest. However, Sukuna doesn't heal his wound with Reverse Curse Technique. Instead, was episode 4 and chapter 8 a foreshadowing of this? After ripping off the arm of a finger bearer cursed spirit, Sukuna states that even a cursed spirit would miss their arm. And what did Gojo do at the beginning of this fight? He burned off Sukuna's arms. And we have to note that despite being a cursed object, Sukuna was never a cursed spirit, and right now he's inhabiting the body of a human. So, is there a limit on how many times he can heal himself? Let me know what you think in the comment section below. It would make sense for Gojo's plan to be an attempt to weaken Sukuna before anyone else fights him, so that there is a chance to actually defeat him, as Kenjaku, the mastermind behind everything, came to the same conclusion in chapter 222. After all, people like Kashima are ready to go up next. Not Yuta. Yuta is bad right now. However, it doesn't look like the clash is ending anytime soon, because even though they both shouldn't be able to use curse techniques off the domain, Gojo very kindly demonstrated how to fix this burnout to Sukuna. This is where we learn another crucial aspect of the past. It was Kenjaku who actually taught Sukuna to split his soul into 20 curse objects. With Kenjaku helping Sukuna only once, he learned how to do it on his own, which is how he shifted himself into Megami. This now explains the binding vow that they were talking about in chapter 220, since Sukuna and Kenjaku must have exchanged one when Sukuna's soul was split, and a deal was made for him to teach Sukuna how to become immortal in the first place. Not only that, this also connects with every single previous chapter of Jujutsu Kaisen, as now we know how Kenjaku knew exactly where and how many pieces of Sukuna as well as other curse objects existed. He's been in the business for 1,000 years, making binding vows with a bunch of ancient sorcerers for reincarnating into the culling game, piquing their curiosity on how to achieve what Sukuna had done in the first place. Which brings us back to the fact, just like Gojo, Sukuna can heal his burnout with reverse curse technique after only witnessing it once. What's funny is that Sukuna most probably never learned this trick because nobody in the past actually ever survived his domain for him to even bother with curse technique burnout. This further adds to how Gojo is matching and even surprising Sukuna, healing each other's loneliness of being the strongest. But Gojo's joy doesn't last long, because Sukuna's purpose behind not healing was to focus on his next attack, the ultimate card that Megami wanted to take his chance on, the strongest Shikigami of 10 shadows, Mahoraga. This proves that Gojo was correct. He claimed that even with 20 fingers Sukuna, he would defeat him. By now, if Sukuna had no knowledge of Unlimited Void through Yuji's memories or 10 shadows to pull out, Gojo would have won the fight and killed Sukuna at this point of the story. It would have been that easy. Just think about it. Malevolent Shrine was destroyed at the same time as Unlimited Void. If this wasn't the case and Gojo's domain persisted just a bit longer, Sukuna's brain would have fried immediately, because that domain is a guaranteed instant win once its sure hit takes effect. Moreover, Sukuna definitely exhausted Shrine itself, since Dismantle and Cleave won't work on Gojo because of Limitless. Even for the Fire Arrow and True Jujutsu that Sukuna used on Jogo, it would have to touch Gojo, so that's out of the question too. Plus, Gojo proved he can withstand Malevolent Shrine, and even the thousands of attacks of Curse Technique that were within it. He completely healed his slashed up eyes from his domain. This proves, if the circumstances was Sukuna's original body with 20 fingers, the winner, fair and square, would be Gojo, as Sukuna has a plethora of information and secrets on Gojo that he didn't have vice versa. However, there's no fair game when it comes to pure evil. Right after the collapse, whilst both of them get into a physical combat again, Gojo himself wonders why Sukuna hasn't used 10 shadows until now. He knows that Sukuna has access to all of Megami's memories, so there's no doubt that Sukuna is aware of just how powerful it is. In chapter 117, we saw them talk about how the Gojo and Zenin clan heads, who had the same set of curse techniques in the Edo period, they killed each other in a clash. Megami had concluded that the 10 Shadow Sorcerer certainly used Mahoraga in this battle for this result. It had been 3 minutes and 9 seconds since Gojo used his domain, and within it, he had held the lead for 3 whole minutes. During this time, Sukuna had only used domain amplification to fight Gojo's Limitless, since their sure hit effects were gone. Hence, he was getting awfully skeptical about why Sukuna took such a risky option of not retaliating within the domain and chose to collapse it from the outside instead. My dude even theorizes that Sukuna is worried that Gojo will one-shot Mahoraga, but it seems that Gojo didn't hear the saying, "Be careful what you wish for," or that the main character should never have a monologue like this, because that's when suddenly he hears Mahoraga's wheel turning with a click. When did Sukuna even summon Mahoraga, you might ask? Was it within the domain? Because earlier, we didn't see him do the hand sign at all. Or did he just pull off an Aizen where he said, since when were you under the impression that I wasn't using Kyoka Sugetsu? Because what if Sukuna actually summoned Mahoraga before the battle even began and hid it in his shadows like Megami showcased earlier? This would mean that Mahoraga is adapted to Limitless completely, including red and purple, giving a major disadvantage to Gojo. Now, he could have definitely one-shot it with something like repeated Hollow Purple, because we can theorize that if his reverse curse technique speed is higher than Mahoraga's, so is his attack speed. But if Gojo doesn't have the first move, it would spell out a very terrible scenario, which only goes downhill because out of nowhere, Gojo starts feeling dizzy and has a nosebleed. No, not that type of one.
This is exactly what I've been waiting for.
And it's also not because Sukuna induced some sort of poison in Gojo's body. As he remarked in chapter 76, he was working on distinguishing poisonous objects. Thus, Sukuna being the king of poisons doesn't really factor here. The most probable case is because of Gojo's sheer exhaustion. As discussed before, whilst Gojo doesn't run out of curse energy under normal circumstances, constantly spamming domains could prove to be his Achilles heel, and that is exactly what he's been doing so far. All three of his domains have also been significantly prolonged, undoubtedly putting him and his curse energy reserves under incredible stress. Remember how exhausted Gojo was after casting a 0.2 second domain after fighting Jogo, Hanami, Choso and Mahito at Shibuya? Right now, he must be feeling that exhaustion multiple times over, not to mention him pushing his limits with forcefully healing curse technique burnout. As Akadami pointed out in this very chapter, Gojo has managed to do impossible things each time, and if he didn't figure out a way to tackle Mahoraga despite knowing about it in such detail, he wouldn't be the fantastic battle strategist that he is. In fact, we might get to see Gojo pull up with another technique or even a domain expansion that he's never used before, and this will shock everyone, creating another impossible moment, as he would prepare for the worst case scenario knowing that Mahoraga could adapt to his first curse technique and Limitless. So Gojo would need a plan B with a second domain to match Sukuna's two different powers. Now, to enjoy more peak fiction, watch the video on your screen right now.